Welcome to Aging Disgracefully, weekly oddcast of seriously funny and sometimes raunchy monologues. I'm Carolyn Meyer, and I've got a story for you. Here's episode number 13, Temporary Housing. I have a habit of falling for old houses and unsuitable men. A few decades ago, after being divorced for several years, I'm staying in an artist colony in Taos, New Mexico. I plan to finish writing a novel I've been working on, or maybe start a new one. I have never been in the Southwest before. I'm supposed to be here in Taos for 1 month, but the director of the artist colony has let me renew my fellowship and keep renewing it, and now I've been here for 6 months. The novel's a shambles. I haven't no idea what I'm going to do for the next one, and I know that I'm going to have to leave. But I, born and bred in central Pennsylvania with long sojourns in New York City and Connecticut, have fallen hopelessly in love with New Mexico. One golden autumn afternoon, Richard and Frankie and Hester and Vernon, all long-haul residents of the colony, pile into the second-hand Buick I've nicknamed Sarah in honor of my mother. And the five of us head down the road to Chimayo, about a village, it's halfway to Santa Fe. And our destination is a restaurant known for great margaritas, as well as enchiladas and sopapillas. We're in a mellow mood as we start back up the Taos to a couple of hours and a couple of margaritas later. And I pull off the highway to watch a spectacular sunset. A hot little sports car, a Triumph maybe, I don't know, an MG, whatever. It pulls in next to Fat Sarah, and the driver is a really good-looking guy. My passengers are shy as rabbits, and they scurry off in search of solitude among the sagebrush, and I stay behind to check out the hot driver of the hot sports car. His name is Sam, and he has a killer smile. We chat. I'm from back east, I tell him, but I've fallen in love with New Mexico. I'm in real estate, Sam says, and he deftly steers the conversation around to asking if I might be interested in buying a place in Santa Fe. Something small, he says, close to the plaza, so you could walk there. Sure, I tell him. If you've got something for under $30,000, I'd be interested. Now, this is 40-odd years ago, so Sam doesn't fall over laughing. You couldn't buy a doghouse in Santa Fe today for under 30 grand. I gave him my phone number and Taos, and to be quite honest, I'm more interested in further conversation with Sam than I am in real estate. I already have a house back in Pennsylvania. I don't need another one. The sun sinks below the horizon in a blaze of glory. Sam drives off in his sexy sports car. My friends emerge from the sagebrush, and Fat Sarah heads back up to Taos. 2 days later, Sam calls. I've got just the house for you, he says. Come on down to Santa Fe. I'll take you to see it. The house looks like it was designed and built by one of the three little pigs, Smart Pig. The material is solid, but the architecture is definitely porcine. 3 rooms, shotgun layout, hip roof, big front room with a kitchen area. I can see how that would work for my office. The large back room has a flagstone floor, skylight, beehive fireplace, make a great living, sleeping area. There's a stained glass window in the odd little room in between, and it feels like a private chapel. I reimagine it as a dining room. The house is small, a lot smaller than my house in Pennsylvania, but I don't need much space. I wouldn't have an actual living room or an actual kitchen or an actual office, but I would have a formal dining room. Funky, yeah, you might even call it charming, maybe even a Santa Fe chic. I imagine saying, "You've got to come over for dinner, Sam. Be my first dinner guest." and Sam saying, "Great, I'll bring champagne." Sam. Handsome Sam. I don't even have to think it over. I make an offer under $30,000 and it's accepted. Now all I have to do is drive 2,000 miles back to Pennsylvania, sell my house there, pack up my stuff, rent a U-Haul, and drive 2,000 miles back across the country to New Mexico. And that's what I do. A few weeks later, I arrive in Santa Fe in the middle of a November rainstorm. Fat Sarah towing the U-Haul. I have no one to help me unload the trailer. The skylight is leaking. There's a big puddle on the flagstone floor. I call Sam. He's out of town, his secretary tells me. He and Kathy always go to Hawaii about this time. What can I help you with, Carolyn? Kathy. He never mentioned Kathy. No more Sam. After a couple of years living in the third little pig's house, I hanker for an actual office and an actual living room and an actual kitchen. And I find an old house in a quirky neighborhood next to the railroad yards in Santa Fe. The diesel locomotives never shut off. They throb throughout the night. Naturally, being an old house, it needs work, starting with a kitchen. I hire the friend of a friend to give it a makeover. He's a likable guy as well as a good carpenter, and he attacks the job with vigor, ripping out the old sink, tearing out the ugly cabinets, and then disappearing. My friend had failed to mention that her carpenter friend is bipolar. He's yanked out everything while in a manic mood, and now he has fallen into a depression. While I wait for him to surface again, I cook my meals in an electric frying pan and wash the dishes in the bathtub. I have never been attracted to men in suits with 9-to-5 jobs, and I've never been attracted to ranch houses or Cape Cods. Even before those funky houses in Santa Fe, I felt for old houses that seemed like a really good deal in the beginning. Houses with possibilities, houses with good bones. Something unlovely and unloved, but not unlovable. An ugly duckling that I can imagine transformed into a swan. It should be emphasized again that I'm talking about houses and not about men. Men are either lovable or unlovable, but they are not transformable. I don't even try. My first ugly duckling of a house was back in Connecticut. Gloomy place, built in the 1920s. Kitchen hadn't been updated in decades. However, there's an unfinished second floor, and I have 2 little boys, and I'm pregnant with my third. So we need the space. My husband says he can do most of the work himself, and for the next few years, he does. But as it turns out, the marriage itself is in need of a complete remodel. That doesn't happen. And 10 years later, I decide to start a new life back in Pennsylvania, where I was born. I'm hoping I'll be able to form a warm, respectful relationship with my mother. The kind of relationship I have not had for years, if ever. I know it wouldn't be a good idea to live in the same town with her. Instead, I find a big old brick house an hour away. It's in a picturesque college town on the banks of the Susquehanna River. The house has been split into 2 apartments. My plan is to live in the smaller one and rent out the other one, and that will help pay for the mortgage. Warning, never rent to a lawyer, especially one who is retired and has nothing much to do. My litigious tenant in the big front apartment spends his days looking for something to complain about and then threatening to withhold the rent until I have it fixed. I can't avoid him, although I try. He's a terrible tenant. I'm a terrible landlady. The town is very small, too far from any city. My plan to forge a warm and respectful mother/daughter relationship does not go well. It's during that time, with my mother nagging from an hour away and my lawyer threatening from the other side of the wall, that I head west to the artist colony in New Mexico and wind up moving to Santa Fe. Eventually, though, charming Santa Fe also begins to feel claustrophobic. I decide to head south to Albuquerque, a town big enough to allow me room to breathe. I rent a place to give myself a break from home ownership until a friend in real estate calls to tell me that he's found the ideal house. It suits you perfectly, Tom says. Just needs a little TLC. He sounds very much like Sam, although he's gay, so there's no romantic motive here. I've made a solemn vow never ever to do this again, but naturally I break my vow and acquire another ugly duckling of a house. This one is in a great neighborhood on a lovely piece of land, but it doesn't need just a little TLC. Like the others, it needs a total makeover. Windows replaced, walls removed, bathroom redone, kitchen brought back from the dead. The contractor predicts that I'll soon meet a man who can't resist the house or me. At that point, I've been single for 14 years. But lo and behold, just such a man does appear. His name is Tony, and he marries me. Now, here's the thing about Tony. He doesn't care where he lives. He's never owned a house. He's not a man who needs to own things. My former husband was handy. He could fix anything. Hang wallpaper, put up shelves, repair plumbing. Tony can't fix a damn thing. Brilliant, wonderful writer, but he has not a practical bone in his body. I describe him to someone as my useless husband. You call your husband worthless? No, not worthless. He's like a diamond tiara, extremely valuable, but you can't use it to unplug a stopped-up sink. I'm always the one who has to call the plumber. Then, 3 years into the marriage, Tony lands a teaching job in Texas, and I get ready to move again. Predictably, Tony is not into house hunting, and he abandons me to the local real estate agent, a Texas lady with a blonde beehive hairdo. I make it clear that I'm not interested in a colonial with pillars in a tidy suburban neighborhood with lawns and landscaping, and she takes me to a 1920s Tudor a few blocks from the town square. It suits you perfectly, she says. All it needs is a little love. I walk into a dingy living room smelling of abandonment. Of course, I buy it. Then, after 5 years of Texas heat, humidity, and politics, we're back in New Mexico. Replay what I just told you about Tony and house hunting. This time, I find a slightly scruffy Victorian just off Old Route 66, built over a century ago. It's even got a historic plaque. Stucco needs repair, roof leaks, front porch is falling down. Of course I buy it. But after a few years, we've had enough of houses that need fixing and yards that need tending, and we talk about downsizing. We look for an apartment, something big enough that we can each have an office. And after years of rescuing old houses, each time swearing, this is the last time, I find an unfinished loft in downtown Albuquerque. We'll have a place where everything is new. Everything works. We've done the right thing. Finally, this is where we belong. Our new home was not built by one of the three little pigs, but there is a big bad wolf in this story. Not long after we move in, Tony is diagnosed with a lung disease. There's no cure. It's terminal. And that big bad wolf huffs and puffs, and blows our house down. You can read this and other stories at my blog at funnycarolyn.com and leave me a message. Tell me what you think. But do come back next week for a special treat, episode number 14, another conversation with Lusty Banger, retired porn star. And be sure to subscribe. I'm Carolyn Meyer, and I'm aging disgracefully.